Manti Te'o, remember him, Bob?
Yes, I
Notre
do.
Dame linebacker.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. Yeah.
This imaginary. Oh, never mind. We all remember the story. He's back in the news a little bit. He popped back into the news because the combine is coming up, as we all know, all of us who remorselessly follow the NFL as we do. And Te'o did an interview, I think, was talking about a little bit how he doesn't think that the things that he went through with this whole Twitter misadventure and whatnot were going to impact how people thought of him as he heads to the combine. Now, what's interesting about it is you pointed out that on several draft things that you're looking at, he has fallen weight. This is a guy who most people had projected as a top 10, some even a top 5 draft pick, is now thought of as maybe a first rounder. That he's really gone down there. And of course begs the question where the Seahawks pick at 25. If they had rated him that high as a top 5 or top 10 guy, and he's there at 25, he kind of fills a need in terms of position need at linebacker, but still he would be the guy at the top of your chart still available. Would you take him at 25?
Well, I think if he's the player that he was talked about being throughout the year, and I'm not going to pretend I watched every Notre Dame game, but we talked to Dave Wyman off the air about it, and he said, he watched him all year and said, this is an NFL player. That was his assessment. Now, that was before the Alabama game where he looked terrible and could have been for a lot of reasons, could have had a lot to do with what was going on off the field and the whole catfishing thing. Who knows? I think, listen, his fate will be sealed with his interviews. I don't know what he's going to show him I don't know what they need to see from him at a combine that's going to convince him, yes, he is physically an NFL player, he's not. I think it's all about how he answers the questions, his demeanor in answering those questions, really getting deep into that story and how much was he behind it? Was he behind it at all? How involved was he? Because, again, part of the appeal to him was that he was such a great leader.
Right.
It was the mental part of it. He's a great leader. People want to follow him. If he had any involvement with this, I think that's going to impact who he may be in somebody's locker room, and I think that might be a red flag for some people. But in terms of physical attributes, what he does well, what he did well, I don't know what anybody's going to learn at the combine from him.
I don't either, and you look at the Alabama game, the one game where he really did not play at the same level, and actually our pal Michael Bradley was talking about him getting shoved all over the field in that game. How much, did he know the story was about the break, how much that impacted him? But, we've talked about how much fun it would be to be a fly on the wall, because the most interesting thing is going to be how he handles the 10, 15, 20 interviews, because when we visited with Tony Softly on this, you can check out the podcast on the webpage, talk about it a little bit. I asked him, he's been a guy who has done this, has been a part of the combine, has been in the room, and you got 15 minutes to ask questions. What would you ask? And he said, well, that would be obviously number one, would be what happened in that circumstance. And I even suggested that how he answers as opposed to what he says might even be more important. So this is a guy, I'll say in the case of Te'o, and this would impact the Seahawks or anyone else who's thinking of taking him, combine is huge for him.
The interviews.
It's gigantic for him.
And listen, if the Seahawks thought highly of him to begin with, if he does all right, if they get satisfactory answers to their questions in the interview process,
take him.
I wouldn't have a huge problem with it.
No. Come on, Manti.